Hey, I'm Justin Howe, and this is my good friend Bob Sennard. He's a fellow member in the Christian Motorcyclists Association. As I said before in some previous videos, I'm just trying to get everybody's stories just to see all the people who come from different walks of life, just with the common ground of Jesus. So just to start out, Bob, I guess I'll start with the general question. Like, what's your story? What brought you to Nashville, and what do you do?
Academic medicine moves you all over the place. Went from Chicago to Detroit to Boston to Ann Arbor to Columbus, Ohio to Nashville to Dallas, back to Nashville.
Oh, so you lived in Nashville beforehand too. Okay.
My 1-year fellowship. And the job brought me here. Glad to be here.
Okay. What type of work do you do here in Nashville?
I do head and neck cancer surgery and head and neck reconstruction at Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And I got the mask. Here, when you're seeing this in posterity, you might say, why is he wearing a mask? And it's because it's COVID. And we're trying to, I've had some exposures, so I'm trying to make sure.
And Dr. Bob is concerned for my health.
Yes, to
which
make
I
sure
appreciate.
that does not get infected from me.
Oh, also, I forgot one introduction. This is Moose, by the way. He's a good boy. How long have you been here in Nashville?
2005.
2005, okay. So how long would you say you've been a believer, by the way?
I'd say it comes in stages. I was raised Catholic, and so one would think that would mean I was a believer from the very beginning. And I always knew of God, but I really didn't understand grace and the Bible. That was one thing you did. Even going to Catholic school, you did not read the Bible. At least back then, things have changed. And so I really didn't understand grace, what it was all about, until I met my wife. And she's a Protestant, Presbyterian background, but she knew what it was.
Okay.
After we were going to a Catholic church for a while, after we got married, this was in Dallas, the diocese that we went to had a priest who had been convicted of molesting kids. And so the diocese was hit with like a $75 million lawsuit settlement, and church ceased to become church. It was like a business meeting. And so my wife said, well, why don't we go to my church? And we did, and it was just an eye-opener. I mean, we read the Bible, we learned it. And of course, she already knew it, but I didn't. I mean, I knew some of the words, but I didn't know what it was about. It was just this thing that I did. And that had the most, I would say that was truly when I became a Christian, even though I probably was fit under the title of being one for many years before that. I didn't really understand it until then.
I don't want to talk down on the Catholic Church, but I have talked to some of my, when I was in college, when I was part of the Baptist campus ministry, I also talked to some of my previously Catholic friends, and they said their stories sounded really similar to yours. They said they kind of knew what boxes to check on being like a proper Catholic or a proper Christian, but like they were missing a lot of the grace or relationship that they felt with God when they found like a campus ministries or found a church that they were really plugged into. So that's interesting that your story, like Matt, really connects with some other stories I've heard too. How long have you been married to? Your wife's name is Elizabeth, right?
Dorothy.
Dorothy, I'm sorry.
Yep, yeah.
How long have you been
91.
91?
So next year will be 30 years.
Oh, I was 1 year old when you guys were.
Oh, Lordy.
I'm sure you've learned a lot from her from over the years, but could you tell me some of the things she's taught you that has just like transformed you over the years?
Well, I mean, it's what I mentioned. I mean, that is the single greatest thing.
Nope.
Oh, close one there, Moose.
Yeah, he's good.
she's a pediatrician, but she worked for 1 year, and we started having kids, and that was it. She decided she was going to raise the kids and do that full time, and I'm glad that she could find satisfaction in doing that.
Yeah.
And but what I learned about Christ and grace, there isn't anything. I don't know that there's anything more important to learn, no matter who you learn it from. But I sure learned it from her.
That's neat. So what changes do you see in yourself now compared to maybe when you were going to school when you were younger?
I'd say focus. You know, when you're, the whole process of going to high school to get into good college, killing yourself in college to get the good grades to get to the good med school, working hard in med school to get the good grades to go to residency, working hard in residency to get the good letters to go to fellowship. Everything was about education, studying. It's a pretty selfish pathway, because you have to be. You've got to devote your time to yourself, your books, and that's what life was for, you know, a good 20 years. And it didn't have to be that way. You know, it sure could have been. It could have been better. It could have been more fulfilling. It could have been more purposeful had I understood more about grace at that time.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound like an easy path.
It's just long.
How would you say your work as a doctor or work at Vanderbilt has affected your journey in Christ, or vice versa? How's Christ affected your work?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's specifically Vanderbilt, different from the University of Texas, where I was for the 10 years before that. Before I understood grace, every person who didn't do well was a personal failure. And I heaped the responsibility on myself, as many others did as well, without thought that, you know, God had a plan that was bigger and more important than mine. And that was the most significant change in terms of me at work, that came with understanding the Bible and understanding grace. So now when I pray, I don't pray for results, and I know we do that a lot in LOJ. We're praying for someone to be healed. We're praying for something to happen, and I don't do that, not because I think it's wrong, but I recognize that there's a plan, and so I pray for understanding and acceptance of His will among the patients, their families, myself, and that regardless of what we want, there's a higher purpose than what we want.
Yeah, there is I know, like, I always pray for like spiritual healing or miraculous healing, but
it's not just you though. It's everybody, and I understand it. I think that is a good thing to pray for. But then what do you do when it doesn't happen?
My mind always, and I don't say this out loud during my prayers, because I definitely believe God could, and I definitely think for the morale of people, like, we do pray for those people. But my mind always goes back to a very little known verse for Meshach, Reshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel. How they say that God will deliver them, but then they add at the end that little caveat, but if He doesn't, we know He's in control. And I feel like we do forget that a lot, that sometimes we do live in a broken world. Sometimes bad things do happen, and unfortunately, as a LOJ member, I have been to a lot of funerals as well of bikers who have gone down, or people who weren't able to overcome cancer. And that's a part of their story as well. But that doesn't mean that God's not in control as well. Like, honestly, and I'm sorry for hijacking your story. This is yours. But
this is your story as well.
That really struck a chord with me, though, just because I do know that God could heal them if he wanted to. But I also know sometimes that's not part of the story. Or sometimes it's time for them to just find peace in God and be in everlasting rest.
But I understand what you mean about respecting the morale of the group.
Yeah.
Who truly, I think many people do pray expecting that can change an outcome. And maybe it can. Maybe what we understand is affecting an outcome is not the right understanding. Anyway,
I think
that is what I do.
Yeah, I think that is what hurts a lot. And talking with some people who used to be believers as well, I think that really hurts. I feel like that really hurts them sometimes in that they lose their faith because they had a father who passed away, or they had something that's so overpowering, so anxious in their life that wasn't resolved, and they really ask, why did God let this happen?
Or they lose a child.
Right. Oh yeah. Or they've laid their foundation in something that they lose. And they say, well, if God really cared for them, then they wouldn't have let that happen. And I feel like that's definitely not the mindset we should be having. And a huge mindset is sometimes we don't know where our story is going, or sometimes God has something different in mind for us. So continuing with the story, this was all before I actually knew you. Let's move to a point where I actually did meet you. Why did you seek out a Christian Motorcycle Association?
I've been riding with Moonshine Harley Davidson. They're Nashville area Harley riders. There's two different ones, I think. Anyway, they're just groups out of the dealership going on rides and they were okay, but there wasn't a lot of fellowship. There were small groups of people who knew each other, but within the groups, people didn't talk. And I was honestly, not looking for another riding group. I decided I was looking for a ministry group. I wanted there to be some purpose to what we did. And I just did an internet search. I know that sounds maybe that's not a great story, but that's what it was. I read about many different Christian motorcycle organizations in the area. Let me just let the dog out. And come on. Go on, hurry up. What I was impressed with was the organization of CMA. The all the way from chapter to state to region to national to international. There was a hierarchy, there was a structure, there was a lot of thought that had been put into making it what it is, as opposed to a bunch of people getting together and kind of make it up as you go.
Right.
And it gave Kevin Clark as a contact to email and said, what do you guys do? And he said, well, on Saturday, we've got a Bible study up at Tank's house. He gave me the address, said, see you there. And that's how it all came to be.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I definitely feel like, and it goes to international levels as well. Like the Run for the Sun is just amazing. When you have that much organization, it almost seems like there's a real purpose behind it too, or that God's really working through it.
When you read that article that John sent out about the group in Ethiopia, and you say, these are the downstream effects that I would say we don't see, because we did get that story, but I'm sure there's many other stories that we don't know about of success that have occurred. And it's not like you have to hear every story. You hear just a couple, and you know you know you're accomplishing something.
Right. Yeah, you can definitely hope. That's really cool. A little off topic. What's been your favorite motorcycle that you've personally owned or ridden?
Well, I have two, and they're the only two I've ever had, and probably the only two I ever will, given my age. I like each of them for what they are, but I think the Road Glide is really odd.
Yeah, I do like that one.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any last nuggets of wisdom for anyone who's maybe struggling in their faith or just someone who needs encouragement?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think it's a good one to close out.
For people who are struggling, I would pray that they would connect with somebody who can help them to see why they are struggling and why they shouldn't be. You know, I'm going to give an example that kind of helps convey it, but this is one of the events we were at, I think it was for the fallen vets, that ride.
The fallen soldiers? We
met, I can't even remember where we went. We went to a cemetery. We went to a number of different stops along the way. And at one of the stops, there was a gentleman who came up to us. It was Kevin and I and John. And he started asking us about our group. And he said, you know, I know I should be reading the Bible more. I know I should be going to church more. I know I should become a better Christian. And he said an interesting thing. He said, you know, the problem with our youth and our kids is that as parents, we don't interact with our kids. We let them do their gaming. We let them do their electronics, and we just don't have a connection with our kids like we used to and like we should. And he was proud because he said that he and his kids played board games on weekend nights, and that was their means of getting together. And this was early on, and I didn't have the guts at that point. I do now, but I didn't have the guts to say, you know, you're unsure about where you stand with Christ, yet he's given you this gift, not of board games for $25, but he's given you this venue where you and your kids can interact, where you can be their father, their role model, teach them. How do you put a price tag on that? How could you wonder whether or not there's a God and that there's a Christ when he's given you this absolutely priceless gift? And I wish I'd said that. It would have been good, but I didn't.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah,
I can understand that.
And so that's what I would hope for, is for people who are unsure and they're looking for direction, that they would realize that they don't need for God to show them something. He already has. And if they would just realize what's right and plain in front of them.
Yeah, I like that. Everyone needs that type of encouragement. And I feel like when you're by yourself, it's really hard to miss. But there's a phrase I like, no man is an island. I definitely think God puts people in your life to help give you that encouragement or help keep that accountability. I think that's a good nugget of wisdom for the audience. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thanks for joining us with Bob Sinnard, Moose, and myself. I hope you guys have got something out of this. And I guess if I see this in 20 years later, just stay encouraged, future me. Anyway, y'all stay blessed.